So this week I wanted to come on and make another video on Gorilla Technology Group. And around 2 weeks back, I made a video on the company, talked about why I believe buying their stock now, when it's still relatively early in their company timeline, will pay off big time in the future, in both the near term and long term future. And the reasons for that mainly are that, right now the company's sitting around, or stock sitting around $450 million of market cap. And they have around $6 billion worth of contracts that are waiting to be signed in their pipeline. And again, this stock is so heavily shorted. I mean, any small piece of bad news will really restrict the stock from going really much higher ever since around this April level, when the shorts really started to latch onto the stock. And it really has kept the stock under 20 for a majority of the time. And then even when it goes above 20, it kind of slowly fades back down to the 20 levels. And I think in the short term, that has really withheld the amount of gains that the stock can see. But I think in the long term, it'll end up helping, because it's allowed more people to invest now at these levels than I think it would have previously. And, these $6 billion in contracts, I've talked about it before, that for a $450 million valued company, obviously the company is overvalued. I mean, if they end up, the only way they wouldn't see any growth is if they weren't able to sign those contracts. But the company is very confident in their pipeline, and they really take pride in not overstating anything in terms of what's to come in the future. They choose their words carefully, and they don't over exaggerate certain contracts. But the reason I made the video when it was around $17, and if you were to get in early, then it would already have already kind of slowly paid off for you here, because now we're sitting around 20. And the reason for that is I just wanted to talk about this big signing that they had announced on September 17th. I was going to make a video last week, but I wanted to wait to see how the stock would react. And as you can see, had a huge jump on that day on the 17th, and then kept kind of rising. And then it eventually did kind of fade down a little bit, and then had a nice rebound. And the reason it faded down was because the company, investors were waiting for the company to officially release an SEC filing, which they did do on Friday. So that's great to see. But going back to the contract, this is a $1.4 billion contract with working together with another company in Singapore to build data centers. And this is not only in Singapore, they'll be doing this all over Southeast Asia. So Thailand, Indonesia, and the $1.4 billion is over 3 years, and they have a $300 million initial phase, which will actually be starting this year in Q4. And this is a ton to be excited about if you're an owner in Gorilla, or maybe if you were waiting for something big to come and now you're going to invest in Gorilla. Because right now they announced around $100 to $110 million in guidance for the rest of this year. So the full year revenue should be around 100 to 110 million. But they did and that doesn't include, they've said before, doesn't include any contracts that they're thinking they're going to sign or that they hope to sign. It's only stuff that has been 100% signed. And this hasn't been 100% signed yet either. They're still working. It says at the bottom here that they're still, working on certain statements of work. So we're kind of figuring out how exactly it's going to work. But the money is locked in, which you don't see them announce all the time. And you see this is big, the around $300 million first phase, which will have revenue impacts towards the end of this year. And that's something that you could see possibly them raising their guidance, which is another thing that could really catalyze the stock. And this is kind of just one of the many reasons I think that I'm excited for Gorilla. And this was inevitable, even when I made that video 2 weeks ago, the company continuously says just have to be patient and they will sign these contracts. And this is, I think, the first of many. They've announced they're signing 1.6 billion of their 6 billion in contracts by I think mid 2026. And I don't know if this is considered 1.4 billion of that 6, or if that's considered only 500 million, because it's around 500 million a year. But either way, there's more contracts to come. And that's really what I think there is to be excited about for Gorilla. And they've kind of raised the baseline here as this 20 level again, which is nice to see. It was kind of sitting around the 17, 18 level. And in my opinion, I think after this, if you're already investing, I would definitely stay invested, because I think that when they announce earnings mid-November, they could definitely raise guidance. And that will really be the catalyst that'll send this thing, I think, to around the 40 levels. I think this is easily $1 billion company. I mean, you just look, you're going to have $6 billion in contracts signed at some point. And 1.6 billion signed by mid 2026. They're already having revenue impacts. This is a 500 million per year contract. It doesn't necessarily all go to Gorilla. They're also partnering with another company, but it's at least going to be, I think, probably 100 million a year for Gorilla. That's at least because again, they're working with another company, but I'd assume they get a majority of the revenue. They have very high tech AI data centers that they're going to be building. So, that'll just double their revenue already. Right now, they're making around 100 million a year. They could probably double next year to 200 million. And that's the guidance that you'd see at those Q3 earnings mid-November, is them kind of talk about guidance for the rest of 2025 and then also 2026, which is going to be huge for this stock. I can only imagine what's going to happen when they announce 200 million in revenue to be expected for 2026. This could easily balloon to $1 billion stock. I mean, you look at some of the other companies that it's competing with, not necessarily competing, but just kind of their peers. I mean, Big Bear AI barely even makes any revenue. They're losing tons and tons of money, and they do have contracts signed, but they are a 10 billion, I think, or a $5 billion company. And Gorilla is still sitting at 450 million. So I think this is the most undervalued AI play, and that's why in the entire stock market, and that's why this is the only really AI stock I'm invested in individually, because I have so much faith in this company, and I watched it go all the way from $4 to $40, and I think this fall, if you look, the run up last fall started around November. And I think this timeline could be very similar, but this time it starts at 19, and this time it could end at 100, or it could end at maybe 50, or it could end at 75. I think it'll end much higher, just because investors are going to start to realize that they are signing real contracts. And yes, there's maybe a lot of questions that come up with the company, because it's a growing company. Maybe they don't file everything, or they're not 100% clear with everything they do. But I think this is a very, very valuable company. And I think investing now, as I said in the previous video, will pay off huge. So this is probably my obviously I have other holdings, but this is up there for my #1 pick right now. I think the value is just too good to pass up. So let me know what you think in the comments. If you're buying Gorilla, if you already have it, if you maybe aren't buying for whatever reason. If you like the videos, please subscribe, and yeah, see you next week.